Human resource management plays an important role in global strategy. In fact, the success or failure in international business to a large extent depends on how human resources are managed and developed. Important, no doubt it is, but it must also be said that the task of managing human resources in international business is quite complex. You will recall that in the first part of this program, we dealt with some cross-cultural aspects of human resource management in international business, such as the staffing approaches, motivation, and leadership, particularly in relation to the management of joint ventures. In the second part of this program, we take up some other aspects, such as the transferability of leadership theory across borders, the challenges arising from workforce diversity, the merits of group diversity, the features of training programs for international executives, and lastly, the role of communication. Let me begin with a little more on leadership theory. Is the leadership theory generalizable across the borders? The question is that is it possible for the managers to effectively transfer leadership styles and behavior from one society to another?
Leadership does not take place in a vacuum. Leadership should be studied in conjunction with the profile of the followers or followership. If you, for example, want to make a comparison between Japan and India, Good Hofstede's study on culture's consequences suggests that Indians are more masculine-oriented and Japanese feminine orientation. Indians more comfortable with uncertainty, but Japanese are more comfortable with certainty. Indians are more prone to taking risk, whereas Japanese are not. In that sense, you find glaring cultural differences, and these glaring cultural differences reflect on the leadership patterns also. It is not only that, in terms of the profile of the followers also, you find glaring contrast. For example, among the Japanese workers, there is a heightened sense of a concept of guilt or shame if something is not done. Whether we find the same thing in Indian context is something that needs exploration. To my view, I think we don't really suffer from the same sense of guilt or shame as the average Japanese person would have. And this makes it difficult for any person to emulate the Japanese leadership style in Indian context. Leadership styles can be transformed, but it takes time, because new perceptions have to be developed, and these perceptions develop because of interaction. For instance, when the companies are coming for joint ventures, collaborations, the host companies are able to see how the companies which are coming for collaboration work, what type of leadership style they follow, and these are going to have an impact over the local companies in course of time. But it's a process which has to be gradual. The local managerial styles cannot be changed overnight, because the people are accustomed to work in a particular manner, deal with people in a particular manner, handle situations in a particular manner. They have a particular type of perception, and these perceptions will be changed in course of time.
It is true that effective leadership varies from culture to culture, from country to country, depending upon its context. For instance, if you take the Japanese context, the leadership is reckoned more center-oriented, and it is more work-related, and the workmen need to be more task-oriented and low on terms of autonomy, whereas in Indian context, it is based more on social and cultural aspects rather than only on work-related issues. For instance, if you take an American example, the leadership is viewed based on a charisma of an employee. For instance, if you take John F. Kennedy or Iacocca, they have made themselves a mark in their society as a great leaders to emulate and follow. But in the context of the Asian, especially in a Japanese context, it is viewed totally more on task-related or work-related rather than in a sort of a charisma or a popularity. So that's how the leadership issues is more with reference to the culture context rather than the individual aspects.
Leadership theories can be transferred by managers across continents, provided there is the issue and understanding of the local cultural sensitivity and the way they position themselves in an organizational context.
In industrially advanced countries, a number of people are moving from developing countries to developed nations. Though this kind of a situation has not arisen in India, at least at the worker or rural levels, some element of diversity can be observed at the top level or middle level. In the years to come, this workforce diversity is likely to increase. Managing a culturally diverse workforce presents considerable challenges for the human resource managers. Now, what are these challenges and how can we reconcile different cultural-based motivational structures in designing work systems and incentive programs?
The effects that diverse work group have on an organization depends on our frame of mind. We can say that if the work group is homogeneous, there will not be any differences because they are so similar, then we don't have to deal with the differences. But in today's context, if there are only similarities and no differences, it is possible that there may not be any dissent within the organization, and if there is no dissent, there cannot be any creativity and innovation. And I feel personally, I think my own bias is that we need in today's context a heterogeneous workforce. But then in a heterogeneous organization, you have problems of discrimination, you have problems of prejudice, you have problems of occupational segregation, and you have problems of stereotyping and what have you. Organizations need to develop mechanisms to cope with all these challenges and learn to manage diversity.
The challenges of cultural diversity are not just an outcome of internationalization or globalization. I would like to define diversity as recognizing the difference in the other. And this is not just valid in terms of internationalization. Diversity and recognizing diversity is an element of creating an inclusive work environment in an organization, creating inclusivity and recognizing the difference of the other are important elements to remember when we talk about diversity.
Since workforce diversity, that is, managing a culturally diverse workforce, is going to become an important issue in the future for multinational corporations operating in India and Indian multinational corporations operating abroad, let us try to examine what are the advantages and disadvantages of group diversity and what are the effects of cultural diversity on group processes.
One of the reasons why multinationals employ people with diverse backgrounds is if you have among a couple of hundred workers people belonging to different nationalities, different castes, different races, different regions, also people belonging to both men, women, physical disabilities and what have you, it is very difficult to organize or unionize these disparate groups. And for this and many other reasons, companies covet and value diversity more than anything in the past.
I think one of the biggest advantages of diversity is that it encourages creativity and innovativeness. Another advantage is that people feel valued and they feel respected and they trust organizations where there is an emphasis on cultural diversity, as opposed to organizational contexts where there's only an emphasis on homogeneity.
It goes without saying that adequate preparation and training in cross-cultural interactions is critical. The relations with the host government and the customers may be damaged if managers, especially the expatriates, are not adequately prepared and trained. Experience shows that Japanese multinational corporations send abroad managers who are well prepared than their American counterparts. They are very well adept at working in foreign environments. A study shows that this success, to a large extent, is attributable to the training programs and intelligent planning done by the human resource management function in most Japanese corporations. Now, what should be some of the features of this training program which can help in maximizing the effectiveness of multiculturalism in an organization?
Multicultural organizations need to value diversity, and therefore what they need is awareness training and skills building training to value and respect differences. They also need to celebrate diversity rather than merely understand and respect diversity. In the past, I think organizations said that a good organization is one which treats others the way one would like to be treated. But in a multicultural organization, the golden rule is that treat others the way they want to be treated.
Training is needed for all type of managers at all levels, in all enterprises, and at all the times. It is a continuous process. The question is what type of training people should be given, and particularly when we talk of multinational enterprises, transnational enterprises. The first basic requirement of these companies are that people who are posted overseas, they can develop an understanding of the local environment, local culture, local customs and traditions. They should be able to read the mind of the local people. They should be able to talk in their language, communicate effectively with them, and motivate them at the work. In other words, we need flexible managers. And these flexible managers have to work in an environment which is changing, which is at times very hostile, which is full of uncertainties. So we must train people for these things. You know what they are doing in Japan? They have a preparatory period for all the people whom they place overseas.
One important part of the training and development is to make individuals understand that there are normal human behavior patterns and curves in appreciating culture, and that things will get better across a period of time, and things will improve. And we won't get back to the honeymoon stage of appreciating a culture, but we'll definitely come to an acceptance level and a level of joy, I hope, at some point in time.
Communication is an inherent part of the role of the manager. It takes a major part of the time of the manager on the job. Effective intercultural communication largely determines the success of international transactions or the output of culturally diverse workforce. Culture is the foundation of communication, and communication transmits culture. Cultural variables in relation to the channels of communication include high context culture and low context culture. Generally, we say that countries of the East belong to high context culture and countries of the West belong to low context culture. Now, what are the differential effects of these cultures on the communication process?
The managers who are posted overseas, they must try to learn the language of the people with whom they have to work. In India, it is fortunate, for instance, that English is a universally accepted language throughout the country. And for that reason, multinational companies coming from different countries with managers trained in English, they don't find any difficulty. But think of many other countries in Asia and Africa where the speaking tradition of English has been very poor, where understanding of English has not been that good, and many companies find it pretty difficult to go and operate in these countries unless they have trained their people in the language of their country. So these communication problems have to be understood, keeping in view the local context as to what is the type of language people are speaking, what are their behavior patterns, and how the adjustments have to be made.
From handshake to embracing to walking hand in hand to many other things, cultural differences matter a lot. Not only that, the color sense, I think, same color may have different meanings in different cultures. Gift taking and bribe giving also, the practices vary across cultures. There is one culture where it is all right for government officials to take bribe, and it is not so in some other countries. Finally, I would also like to say that if you want to send a women executive in today's context, either to Middle East or to Africa, then you may be sending a message that we are not really serious about doing business with them. But it is not the case when we deal with other West European or North American countries, or for that matter, even some of the South Asian countries.
The intercultural aspect of communication is an aspect that considers the dimension of physical space, the way we articulate our words. In some cultures, coming right to the point directly is important, whereas in the Oriental culture, saving face and maybe going about things slightly more subtly and obliquely becomes an important part. There's also the whole issue of gestures that we do in communication. We know classically that certain Occidental countries, the people gesticulate much more as opposed to certain Eastern countries where the gesticulation is not considered to be an appropriate context of communication. So these are some important elements and dimensions of intercultural communication which do impact relationships, and these in turn impact the whole issue of building trust.
We have seen the differential effects of cultures on the communication process. The management of cross-cultural communication largely depends on the personal abilities and behaviors of a manager. Now, what are the personal abilities and behaviors which can facilitate the intercultural communication?
An important personal ability in intercultural communications is curiosity. The second important variable is open-mindedness. And the third important aspect is willingness to learn from others. These three qualities will bring in the desired flexibility and adaptability that would make a person effective over a period of time.
The biggest quality I feel which is needed in the manager's overseas assignment is the receptibility. They must be a good listener. They must try to understand what others are saying, what local people want, in what way they are behaving, what they expect out of them. And it is the duty of the manager to create an environment of trust and understanding between the local personnel and himself. If he is able to do it, he will be a successful communicator.
The kind of personal abilities and behaviors that impact intercultural communication, I would like to highlight the recognition of the fact that, and really recognize what Gandhiji had said about understanding things from the point of view of the other, putting ourselves from the other's perspective is an important ability.
So, with a discussion about the personal abilities and behaviors that facilitate the intercultural communication process, we conclude this part of the program. In managing human resources in international business, devising and designing appropriate staffing approach, motivational structures and strategies, leadership styles and behavior, work systems and incentives, training and development programs for international executives, and developing the personal abilities and behaviors that would facilitate the cross-cultural communication are crucial to the success of international business.